Okay, so today we're going to learn about major keys. We've learned to, hopefully, to read rhythms a little bit. We've learned the names of notes. But now we need to start thinking about pieces of music. So key signatures is the next thing that we need to go to. So there are 3 words here on the board, and I will define each of those. You need to write them down because they also are going to appear on your test. And the first one is key signature. A key signature is the sharps or flats or lack of them, which means nothing. The sharps, the flats, or lack of them found at the beginning of every line of music, comma, telling you which notes will be altered in your key. We just started, and we're talking about key signatures today. So for you're going to have a review of what you already had, which won't hurt a thing. And I'm just starting with the definition for key signature, which is, and I'll repeat that again, a key signature is the sharps or flats or lack of them found at the beginning of every line of music that tells you which notes will be altered in your key. So that means if you see something has one sharp in it, it tells you that one note's going to be a black note. The rest of them will all still be white notes, just like we played when we were in the key of C. And if you want to take a look at a couple of the songs that you have been working on playing, for example, if you look on 181 at the Valentine song, you'll see there that at the beginning of every line there is nothing. There's a treble clef sign, and then there's a 4/4, which tells you how many beats are in each measure, and that will also let you know how many chords you're going to play. But there are no sharps or flats. So that's the lack of them. If we go maybe to, let me see if I find one. Go to Lightly Row, which was kind of our new song in the key of G. And already with the chords, we know that we have one black note because you have a chord that has to put that black note in there. If you'll note here at the beginning of every line, there's one sharp. And it will happen at the beginning of every line of music. I'm not sure why they do that. If you look at 4/4 time, it will only appear at the very beginning of your piece. I guess through the years, people have thought you can probably remember what time signature you're in. But very often, if you're playing along in a piece, you'll kind of forget. You can quickly look back at the beginning of that line, and it will remind you, oh, there's one sharp here. You may not be far enough along in your playing to get to that point where you have to do it, but I guarantee you the farther that you go, your mind will wander. As you're playing, you go, oh my gosh, is that a black note or not? So you can real quickly look back at the beginning of that line, and it will remind you what black notes are. So that shows you what that definition means. At the beginning of every line of music, there's either going to be nothing, which doesn't mean nothing, it means a particular key, or there'll be sharps, any number of them, or flats, any number of them. So when I say any number of them, how many notes do we have before we repeat the same note? If you start on a C, how many different notes do you have? Counting up on your scale. 7. So literally, we could have 7 sharps or 7 flats. We can go up to that because every note could be altered. Now, that's pretty difficult music, and we're certainly not going to play that in here, but it could happen. And there are pieces of music written in 7 flats or 7 sharps or 6 flats, 6 sharps, anything up to that. But normally the key signatures are going to look kind of like the ones behind me here on the board, where if you can see them, there's just a few, usually 1 or 2 or 3 maybe that we will actually see. So we have to learn to know what key we're in. Like when we're playing piano, how do we know where to put our left hand for the chords? We have to know the name of the key. If we're in the key of C, your left hand little finger is going to go on that, on the C. If we're in G, which is the new key we're playing in, now your left hand little finger goes on a G. It lets you know where to go to get the chords in that key. So we need to know what key we're playing in. That's kind of funny because I played piano for like 13 years, never had a clue what key I was in. I could just play the notes, but it's kind of important to know that. So that's one of the things we learn in fundamentals. So we've got a definition for the key signature, the sharps or the flats or lack of them found at the beginning of every line of music. The next word I have up here on the board is a scale. And I need to define that for you because it also is going to appear on your test. A scale is a set of ascending, meaning going up, or descending, going down, pitches, or notes, that form a pattern and span, go across an octave. I'll say that again. A scale is a set of ascending or descending pitches that form a pattern and span an octave. So if we were to write every note C to C or D to D, we would have a scale. A scale just runs every note in whatever key that you're in, and then they will have their key signature that goes along with that. So I'm just going to put one scale up here now. We're going to talk about that pattern in a minute, but right now I'm just going to put it up here. So, for example, if we were doing a C scale, that is a set of ascending pitches. We don't know what the pattern is yet. We will work on that in a minute. But it spans an octave. An octave, again, the 2 notes with the same name. So that goes from a C to a C. And that's what a scale looks like. Of course, we can have a million scales depending upon what key that we're actually in. The third word up there is keynote. A keynote merely means it's the name of your key. It's the note that shows you what key we're in. So once we figure out the name of the key, we can place a keynote on the staff to kind of solidify what key we're in. So how do we figure out what key we're in? We need then to have our rules for labeling major keys. So that's your heading. You need to write it down, the rules for labeling major keys. And underline that or whatever, and there's going to be 4 of them. We're going to write them down, and then we're going to apply them on the board so you see how to use them. Number 1. If there are no sharps or flats, comma, the key is C.
I know that one.
Yes, you do. Good for you. Number 2. If there is 1 flat, comma, the key is F. Frank. Now remember, these are rules for labeling major keys. We'll talk about minor keys later, but not in this chapter. So if you have one flat, the key is F. Rule 3. If you have more than one flat, comma, take the next to the last flat to the right. Comma, that names your key. I'll do it again. If you have more than one flat, comma, take the next to the last flat to the right, comma, that names your key, period. And number 4, if you have any number of sharps, it could be 1, it could be 7, doesn't matter how many. If you have any number of sharps, comma, take the last sharp, not the next to the last one this time, take the last sharp on the right, comma, go up 1 note, comma, look back across that line or space. After you've gone up that note, look back across that line or space, comma. That names your key. That was a little more complicated, so I'll say it again. If you're at home watching this, write these rules in your notebook because these are the ones that we will be following from now on. Okay, so number 4 again is if you have any number of sharps, take the last sharp on the right, go up 1 note, look back across that line or space, and that names your key. Okay, that's all there is. They do have to be memorized eventually while we're working on them in class. Obviously, you can keep them in front of you, but they're not that hard. The first 2 are very simple. If there's nothing, it's C. If there's 1 flat, it's F. So then you have the last 2 that you have to think about, but we're going to apply them right now to a couple of these so you'll see how it works. But before I do, I put some sharps and flats on the board here, which I will kind of move out of the way for you to see. And I want you to notice that they are always on the same lines and spaces. They're never random. They're always where they always are. So if you look, I've got 2 here that have sharps on them. The first sharp is always, and they'll cross the line just like a note does. That is on the line F. Do you see? That one is in the space C. You have to be real careful when you write them because we have to be as careful with them as we are with notes because they have to be where they are. Look over here. First one's an F, the next one is a C. That is a G, a D, an A, an E. They are specifically where they are. They're never out of that order. And so when you start working on the worksheet that I'm going to give you, you're going to see that they're always in the place that they always are. So there's nothing random about these rules. After you work them a while, you begin to kind of realize this pattern that they form. So what rule would we use here for this one, Mackenzie? Rule 1, 2, 3, or 4?
4.
4, because it's sharps. And it says, so I'm going to work this with you. Yes, I need you to watch me in particular. She's already kind of learned this. You take the last sharp on the right. You go up 1 note. You look back across that line or space to see if there's anything there. We're looking to see if there's a sharp on it. There is not. So this is the key of D major. It's just that simple. Take the last sharp on the right, go up 1 note, look back across that line or space You can also look in any octave to see if a D is altered, and it isn't. So it's not D sharp, it is plain D major. Now I want to work on the last one here before we go on. This one has a bunch of sharps. So again, any sharp is going to use rule 4. And actually in the beginning I asked you to write the rule number up there because then I know you're going to the right place, so you're thinking the right things. And it says to take the last sharp, and notice they go in an order. There are no two of them placed on top of each other. They run, I mean they're close together, but they're running left to right. So it's not hard to find the last sharp on the right. So it's right there. Go up one note. Now we look back across that liner space and be sure that you see there is a sharp there. So that note is an F. This is the key of F sharp major. All sharp keys will not have a sharp by their name. In fact, most of them don't. You have to get to quite a few sharps before you will have a sharp by the name. But that's why that extra step is in there, that you have to look back across the liner space so that you will see whether or not it has a sharp name. Now, let's go to number 3 for just a second. So what rule is that, Susan?
3, or 2.
2.
Sorry, I was looking
And
at
it
number
says,
2. If there's one flat, it's a key of F.
all right, you don't have to do any figuring on this one. It's already told you if there's one flat, it's the key of F. It is not F flat. Just because there's flats in the key signature or sharps doesn't mean that your key will always have that by a name. Now, this one, Mackenzie, what rule do we use here?
Number 3.
3. And you read for me what it says.
If there's more than one flat, take the next to the last flat to the right, and that means your key.
All right, there's the next to the last one. Again, they run in an order. It's already got a flat on it, and that's on an E. This is E flat major. Because you're already looking at a flat. We don't have to look back across any liner space. It's already there. So most of the flat keys, F doesn't, but most of the flat keys will have a flat by their name. But on sharp keys, no, not so much. You have to look back across to see if that note is altered in your key. Are there any questions, Mackenzie, on how to do that?
I think I'm good.
I mean, really, if you just follow the little rules step by step, it should work out. Now, I'd like to take another color here just for a second, and then we talked about the keynote. So I used the keynote here as I was actually figuring this one because I followed the rule. I took the last one, went up a step. The keynote is a D. It can be any D, by the way. If you're putting a keynote, you could put that one. It doesn't care which octave it's in. It just says to put that's what your test is going to say. Name these keys and put the keynote on the staff, which is the name of the key. Whatever you put down here, it's got to be one of a D somewhere on that. On this one, on E flat, well, obviously we looked there, you could put it there, or you could put it down here. Now it's E flat. Do I need to put a flat by that note? Nope. The key signature tells you every time you have that note, it's going to be flatted. So it would be redundant to put it by it. You just need to put the note because it's already flatted by that key. Keynote for F, obviously, is any F you want to put. And on F major, again, in doing the rule, I actually went up and put a note there. It could be there, or it could be here. Do I need to put a sharp by it? No, the key signature's already taken care of that. There are no two keys that look alike. So Mackenzie, I want you to look. If I just call this F and forgot to put the sharp there, we already have an F. There are no two that are the same. This one has to have the sharp. It makes it different. They are different keys altogether. Now that's all I'm going to teach today about this. I'm going to give you a worksheet to work on to label major keys using your rules and putting keynotes on the staff. There are a couple of other things that we need to know, but actually, I am going to do one other thing. I said we needed to figure out what that definition meant about a scale. And so you need your keyboard in front of you here. If you remember, we talked about really early on that the way that music is equalized, which means we can play a song in any key and it's going to sound the same. It'll be a little higher or lower. Even for your keyboard in here, you're playing Hot Cross Buns in the key of C, but now you're also learning Hot Cross Buns in the key of G, and it's going to sound the same. The tune is the same. It's just one of them is going to be a little higher than the other. And the only way we equalize is by putting sharps and flats in there. And that way we get new key signatures. So I can play anything in any key as long as I'm using the correct sharps or flats that key needs, and it will sound alike. So that means that every major scale has the same pattern as the next major scale. It doesn't matter whether I'm putting the scale of C major on the board, just like I did here, or if I'm putting G major or F sharp major or G flat major or whatever. They're all going to have the same pattern because it makes them all sound alike. So I'm only going to work one scale on the board for you so that you can see. We have several ways of labeling a scale. We can label them by what we call scale step numbers. So obviously home base, this is the key of C major. There's no sharps and flats. That's the first scale step. Home base is the first scale step. It is the keynote. That's the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seven, and we're at 8R1. We're back home again. So let's figure out what the pattern is for every major scale that exists. A C to a D, is that a half or a whole step? Look at your keyboard.
How?
The
Or
next
whole.
closest note is a half step. Is there a black note between here? Between the C and a D? Yes. So the black note would be a half step to the D is a whole step. So that is a whole step. Between a D and an E on your keyboard, is that a half or a whole step? Mackenzie?
The D and the E. A hole?
It is a whole. Keep going with me. Between an E and an F.
That's a half.
You're right, that's a half. Okay, Susan, between 4 and 5, between the F and the G.
Whole.
It is. Keep going. Between a G and an A.
Whole.
Between an A and a B.
Whole.
And between a B and a C.
Half.
Yes. The pattern for every major scale, our definition is a scale, a set of ascending or descending pitches that form a pattern and span an octave. We know it's spanning an octave. The pattern is whole steps between everything but 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Your test is going to say, where do the half steps occur in a major scale? That's the way it's going to ask you. And it will be between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And every major scale that you have has exactly that same pattern because we have key signatures that create all scales to be equal. Sounds like I'm politicizing that or something. All scales are equal. Black note scales, white note scales. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, but it's a truth, and your test will ask you that question. Now that's pretty much all the notes for this chapter. There are a couple of little odd things that I will add to you on Friday as we actually look at the test. I mean, you can look at the test anytime you want, but instead my goal today is just to give you a worksheet and have you work out the names of the keys so that we're understanding those rules. Okie doke.